Hi everyone, welcome back to our third devlog. As we often say around here, third time's a charm, and that's definitely the case for this devlog. We and the team have worked on a lot of exciting features over the past month, and we would love to share all of these with you today. So, as I said, whilst both previous devlogs we've had plenty of features added, this is the first one where I can truly say with confidence that we have a game. Sure, it may not be the most exciting game yet, but nearly all of the core mechanics have been at least implemented, and some are even working already quite well, and they're integrated as well to work together with each other. Like usual, you'll also be able to find a longer write-up of the entire devlog and what we've been up to and the struggles we've experienced in our blog post, and you can find the link to that down below. Looking purely at the quantity of features now, we may not have added as many this month compared to our previous devlog. Which, speaking of, if you haven't seen the previous devlog yet, I highly suggest you go and watch that first one and also the second one, so you'll be up to speed for this one as well.
It's somewhere over there.
Whilst the quantity of features we've added is lower maybe this time, the quality and size is definitely a lot higher as well now. But I won't keep you in suspense for much longer. Let's get into the exact features we have added over the last month. We teased it the last devlog, and I'm very happy to say that we were able to deliver, and we finished the first version of migrating our world structure from a flat, boring 2D plane into a more exciting 3D world. We decided that 3D, and also felt a bit like 3D worlds were a must for a game, even though it may not have been the easiest to implement. Now, of course, I don't really program that much, so I shouldn't talk too much about how easy or difficult it is to implement a feature, as it was mainly Thomas who was the one who implemented this. So let me ask him instead. So, Thomas, you were the one who has been working mostly on the world generation. Could you perhaps share with the audience a bit about the process that you went through to do all of that?
Yeah, so world generation can be done in a lot of ways. So for our case, we decided to focus on a voxel world, which is basically the kind of world you see in Minecraft. It's like the blocky one. To implement this, I found some tutorials online on YouTube. I think the guy was named Sunny Valley Studios. Of course, you'll find a link down in the description below. And, well, we followed the tutorial and changed where necessary. So what we have right now is actually a seed-based world generation, where we can basically make our predefined levels with a fixed seed for our normal ones, and also generate other worlds when the user decides he wants a random world. One of the things we had to do was also map our grid that we already had to this new world. We had to add offsets basically because, the anchor point of the world is the center, but the anchor point of the grid is always the bottom left. So just some quick math to get them working together. Another thing we had to do was, let our buildings decide what height they would be placed on. Because, you can have different heights of the world. For now, we do it only for one cell, so that means only the cell where our mouse is pointed. But in the future, we plan to, implement it properly, so we can't place a building when there's only one block in the air and none surrounding it.
That's very cool, Thomas. However, I've noticed maybe that perhaps our 3D world isn't fully done yet. You've already mentioned a bit, as well as the way it looks and the way we, for example, have roads implemented on it. What do we still have planned in the pipeline for that, in regards to that?
Yeah, so one of the things I already mentioned was proper height support. Like I said, the buildings, if we have a 2x2 building, it only checks one of those cells, which is obviously not good. We also want to, change the looks of the world visually. Right now it's very hard to see the height differences, and we are still using textures from the tutorial. So yeah, that's also something we have to work on. I think the most challenging part is going to be letting our workers move in a 3D world. Right now they can move and figure out their path on a 2D plane perfectly, but with height differences, this is an extra layer we have to, take into account. Like Marnix already mentioned, roads also have to be changed because now we have to have roads that can be at an incline. This is something William is going to tackle. And last but definitely not least, is adding fauna and flora to the world because right now it's, well, not very lifelike. We want to add more dynamic, well, life to the world so it doesn't feel dead. I think those are the main parts we want to focus on with the world generation.
One other thing we really wanted to accomplish for this devlog was to finally get more of our workstations done. We had the vision, but we couldn't use them yet. And whilst we had already done quite a lot of work on the refinement station, we still lacked the actual ways to get the items into the refinement station, for example, or just get the items in general. That's where the marketplace comes in. Last devlog we had already mentioned the marketplace, and also in regards to how William had already made some of the game logic for buying and selling items, as well as tests for them. But we actually didn't have a marketplace UI yet, so there was no physical button to click to buy something. That has changed now, and the marketplace is officially open for business. As William was the one who worked quite a bit on it, could you perhaps explain to us a bit more about what you've had to do between the last devlog and then where we are now with the working marketplace?
Well, we already had a generic window system in place for the refinement station and all the other buildings, and we also had the ability to sell items. We just created a new window for this marketplace to tie all of these functions together and allow the player to interact visually with the marketplace. The buying and selling functions got slightly expanded with the usage of a resource manager, which also gets used in the marketplace to show the inventory of whatever the player is buying. The core of the marketplace thus is done, and down the line we plan on adding more advanced functionalities like the buying and selling history, or the ability to schedule buy orders for a steady stream of resources to come into the economy.
So now, with the marketplace also being done, I'm very excited and I guess also proud to say that we finally got the first core gameplay loop into a working state. Because of the hard work we've been doing over the past 3 months, lots of coding and stuff, we can finally buy an item, process it through a workstation and then sell it again. It may seem small, but this is basically the entire game, almost done now. We already had some of the standalone things working, like the marketplace, the workers, the refinement station, but there was still a lot of work required to get them working together in a neat way. Well, how did that go? Let's ask the person who was in charge for this, which once again was Thomas. So Thomas, can you maybe explain a bit more what exactly still had to happen to get them to work together?
Yeah, of course. The first thing we had to do was actually give workers an inventory. The inventory system was already pretty much in place, but needed some slight modifications. One of the things we did was add functionality for stacks, is what I call it. You can basically see it as you can have X amount of one item in one slot, and once you exceed that item, a second slot is created, but you only have a limited amount of slots. So that means a worker, for example, can have one inventory slot, which can hold one item, which means, for example, one iron ore, and his inventory is full, while a building has multiple stacks, which can hold, for example, 64 items. Another thing we had to do, since we're talking about, well, buildings, is a workstation had to add accepted inputs. We already had a visual indicator of this, but we never had this working. So we made it work. So now you can select what the inputs are that a building wants to accept. Another thing we had to do was actually change the logic of the building, how it processes item a bit, because this was still a relic from our game jam. So this had to be tweaked a bit because we now had different systems in place. We made it more generic, stuff like that. Another thing we had to do was actually add what we call heat source support. Some buildings, for example a refinement station, needs fuel to work because, well, you need flames. That was also added, so we can now have coal, for example, process a few iron ores before it, runs out of heat.
So I guess my follow-up question is then, well, we spent 3 months getting one workstation done. is it going to stay this timing, or will we be able to maybe take more like a week or 2 weeks to get a workstation done? Because I feel like that can really help with the speed of the game.
Yeah, so it should be a lot faster actually. We tried to make the system on, well, almost every aspect of it pretty generic, meaning that we have a generic resource visualizer. We talk about inventory. Well, we have a generic way to visualize this inventory. We also have a generic resource selector, meaning that, well, every time we want to select from a set of items, we also have a generic component for this, as well as, well, generic logic for the workstation itself. We try to focus as much as possible on using inheritance, so we can easily use aspects we want to reuse often, meaning that our base building has basically almost all the logic and only specific workstations, like for example a crate, which is quite an exception, has to override this logic. But aside from that, most buildings should work with the base building, because for specific features like heat source support, we just added, well, an inspector variable, so we can just say this one has it, this one doesn't have it. So we can basically configure workstations just without writing a single line of code.
Now, time for something that's not code for once, but still very important: the way our game looks. So far, you may have noticed we're still using a lot of the assets we made back during our game jam more than 3 months ago by now. And William has, however, been shifting some of his focus back from development into 2D art, doing a lot of work on our item icons and some other 2D assets. So, William, could you maybe give us a summary as to what you've been up to in regards to art and design and stuff like that?
So I've spent some time working on my workflow of creating sprites for all the different items, materials, resources that we have. And then also making sure that my already previously created sprites are up to date with my current approach to making sprites for the game, so that they're all very consistent.
Now, speaking of the sprites, our game is going to have hundreds of items. Will you have to draw an asset and a sprite for every single item? Because I feel like that could be quite a long and tedious process, especially because we have stuff like, for example, every item can always be made from a different ore, so it would require different colorings and stuff like that.
Well, you would be correct. It would be a very tedious process, and I would lose my sanity if I had to do that, or if I had any left. But I've done some experimenting for coloring in Unity, allowing Unity to colorize the items into the different colors based on our material, instead of having to do that manually for each color. I've been able to do this by supplying grayscaled sprites and then adjusting the color property of the image rendering component in Unity. This had promising results, as you can see on the screen, I hope. And it results me on having to draw only one sprite for each item instead of a sprite for each material. Because we have like 7 or 8 different materials, so I would have to color it into each different material. But this time, I'll only just have to make it in gray, be it using lighter gray for where light hits the item, darker grays for shadows and such. And then with the coloring process, it gives really good results, as you have seen.
So it seems like exciting times are coming up for the visual aspect of our game. Now, you may be more interested in the 2D art part of game dev. Well, be sure to subscribe then, as we have a great video coming up about that very soon, about the workflow. So those were the big features we've added. But of course, we've also added some more smaller features along the time. So, time for another lightning round. Okay, so first off, we finally got around to overhauling our camera controller. This was still a remnant from our game jam, and man, was it very, very, very frustrating to use. Especially for me, as I had to get footage of the game as well to make it appeal to all of you watching now. Simple things like moving around or zooming in and out they seem to be made just as user unfriendly as possible. And that's why I ended up pestering Thomas, who did the original implementation as well, for the past month, until he finally caved and redid the camera controller, which is now a joy to use, let me tell you. It's not perfect yet, but it's a huge improvement, and I don't want to finally like jump off a bridge every time I need to use the camera controller. With the camera controller done, we've also stayed in the camera team and done worker tracking. So last devlog you could already click on a worker, get some fun facts about them like their name and such. Well, now when you select them, you will also follow them walking around. So the camera will follow them. So you can see what they're up to in their regular day of working for you. Another small fun feature that Thomas has implemented is item pop-ups on creation. So let's say that your refinement station is taking iron ore, turning it into iron ingots by smelting them. Well, every time an iron ingot is made, a little pop-up will appear above the workstation, displaying the exact item that has been made. And then lastly, we have a small addition still to Lost Devlog save system. We had already had support for manual saving and quick saving, but now the world can also be saved automatically every X minutes. This autosave timer is configurable from our settings. So as usual, we now reach the part where we try and look a bit into the future and look at what are the features we hope to get done by next devlog. As you may have noticed earlier, our 3D world implementation, while we have one, isn't near completion yet. So that's one of the things that we will be working on by next devlog. I want to have more in a finished state. This would be, for example, workers moving in 3 dimensions, roads going onto an incline, bridges that can cross water, for example, or verifying that all parts of a building are on the same elevation, so there's not like an overhanging building, for example, and just a lot of other things. Then we were already on the topic of workers in 3D. Speaking of workers, we want to get some more work done on them as well. Right now, assigning a worker to a route is very painful as well. The current implementation of doing that assignment is it's a remnant of what we had in our original game jam. It also doesn't allow for specifying the exact item that the worker has to carry between 2 workstations because the inventory system wasn't made yet. So this would be our second goal then. Create a user-friendly UI where we can assign workers specific routes as well as change these routes or remove those routes if the workers are needed somewhere else, for example, or if they need to bring a different item to a workstation. Now, of course, none of these features will be guaranteed to be implemented, but we will do our very best. But maybe we'll go on for something else that's easier, or maybe we have another roadblock. We don't know that for sure yet, so be sure to check back next month, May 27th, for next devlog to see if we manage to actually achieve all our goals. And that about wraps up this devlog. I hope you're as excited as we are about the game, especially now that we can finally play part of it, sort of, kind of. We'll see about that. Also, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. So yeah, if you managed to stick around until now, first of all, thank you. Also, it seems like you're kind of interested in this content. So honestly, if you're not subscribed yet, just subscribe. What are you waiting for? You've just spent like, I don't know how long this video is going to be, 15 minutes watching us. Just subscribe, hit that bell icon. Really helps us out. We get some more feedback as well. We know that what we're doing is good. So yeah, apart from that, it's been all from us this week, and we'll see you all again next week with a new video.